Hello there, this is Daniele from Toolchefs, and in this video we're going to have a look at how you can use dynamic fur on your crowd simulations. Before we start, we need to know a couple of things which are limitations of the current workflow of dynamic fur. The first one is that for each collection you can only have one geometry. With this I mean that you can have any number of descriptions under a collections, but if you are planning to use different geometries for your descriptions, so let's say one description is attached to the head, one other is attached to the arms, you have to use different collections. So again, you can have any number of descriptions under a collection, but all those descriptions needs to be attached to the same geometry, to the same shape. And the other limitation is that if you are planning to use dynamic fur on a geometry that has some cloth cache deformation with the first stack order mode, at the moment that is not supported, but it's going to be fixed in the next release or two, and the same thing applies also for the other limitation that I mentioned earlier. So okay, so here we go. Here we have our character, and we have two collections. One is for short hair, the other one is long hair, and we have already created some hair system setup for these fur basically. So once you are ready to export your variations, you can open the variation builder. Always remember though to add your collections for your hair in the render layer where the basically where you wanted that basically fur or hair, so that basically Atoms knows that that fur must be applied for that variation and so on. I'm gonna provide an agent type name, provide a variation destination path. I'm going to provide a skeleton file. So I'm gonna select the skeleton root. I'm gonna export everything for Arnold. I'm gonna click run. And now my variations are exported. Before you can simulate your dynamic fur, you need an Atoms cache. I've already exported one. And for exporting your curves caches and groom caches, you need to use the CFX simulation exporter. So this tool is actually the cloth exported that we previously had, but that tool has been converted to this one, so to the CFX simulation exporter. And this is because with this tool you can export both cloth and fur, and also have a combination of the two. So for instance, you might have some XGen description that was attached to a cloth mesh in your variation scene. The fur will be simulated following that encloth simulation, the encloth simulation later. So that is going to be what you set up in your variation scene is going to be also applied in the simulation scene. You can of course also for fur first build your scene, check what's going on in your simulation and then export it, but for this example I'm just going to use the build scene and export. So when you export fur, you have to provide the groom cache, which is gonna work also for the static fur. But then if you have just dynamic fur, you can also dynamic fur. You want to also to provide a curve cache path, which is basically the destination path for the Alembic files for your curves. So first I'm going to provide a groom cache path. Always remember here to provide a path with no padding, and same thing I'm gonna do for the curves. And again, don't use any padding here. The padding will be added later, and basically the padding will represent the ID of your agent. I'm gonna provide a cache file and a variation. And this is going to be the variation that we just exported basically. Okay, also another option that has been added just recently is this ignore Render Geo. Basically with this one, when it's enabled, only the geometries that are relevant to the simulation will be created, meaning that, for instance, if you have a character with 10 geometries, but only one is a rigid, one is a cloth, and another one is used for 4, only those 3 geometries will be created. Yeah, basically. So if you uncheck these, all geometries will be created. Sometimes this is useful, sometimes it's not. It's on by default just so that your simulation will be lighter. You can click run, and your scene will be created, and then all the files will be exported. So now if I check here, you see some had the short hair, some other had the long hair. We had the pre-roll so that the hair looks decent. If I press play, basically you see that the hair are simulating. In this example, the hair system has not been properly set up, so you see the head bouncing around, but basically it's just to show you that the hair are being simulated by Maya. So once this is done, you can clear the scene, create an Atoms proxy node. I'm going to attach the cloth cache that I used previously for creating the groom cache. I'm going to provide the variation file that we created just before. And then I want to provide the groom cache. And for this one, you can just pick any of the files that have the padding. So I'm just going to pick the first one. And then for the curves, it's going to be exactly the same thing. So if you don't provide the curves, that basically the hair won't be animated, basically. So I'm going to click variations, and now we can see the variations. You don't see the hair inside the viewport, but you can still see them if you render. So I'm going to just quickly create an Arnold light. And as you can see here, the hair are basically placed on the head of the characters that are being animated. And this is all for this video. Thanks for watching.